The chilly April morning of 2018 began with an unusual disturbance on Deadwood Drive in Greenfield, Wisconsin. 6 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a modest ranch-style house at the end of the quiet street. Neighbors peeked through curtains as tactical-geared officers fanned out, encircling the area in absolute silence. Inside, Robert J. DeAngelis, 73, a retired Milwaukee City Police officer, was preparing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained since leaving the force nearly 4 decades earlier. A rapid knock echoed at 6:47 a.m. Robert DeAngelis, Milwaukee City Police. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 1984 disappearance of Lucia Halbrook." The officers later described the old man's hand trembling slightly as he set down his coffee cup, but his face remained strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment for over 30 years. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Milwaukee, summer of 1984. The industrial city along Lake Michigan stretched out under a thin haze, its old streets interspersed with shuttered breweries and rows of 1950s-era residential neighborhoods. Steam from the lake blew in, making the evenings thick with the smell of metal and damp wood. On Brady Street, faint yellow lights shone down on the mottled stone sidewalks, dark elm trees swaying slowly in the wind. Amid this scene, Lucia Halbrook, 19, a freshman at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, was getting ready to go out. She lived with her mother in the ground-floor apartment of a small building, where the windows overlooked a lawn, and farther off, the shimmering waters of Lake Michigan, reflecting ship lights. On the kitchen table sat an unfinished glass of orange juice and an open notebook with a few study notes for upcoming exams. Lucia put on her red jacket, buttoned it carefully, brushed her hair, and told her mother she was just heading to a classmate's birthday party and would be back soon. Her voice was light, ordinary, neither rushed nor preoccupied. Elena Halbrook glanced at her daughter, thinking of the summer evenings Lucia often spent walking by the lake with friends, and saw nothing out of the ordinary. When Lucia stepped out the door, the living room clock showed just past 8. A neighbor, Mrs. Rowe, watering plants on her porch, saw the young woman pass by, petite, her red jacket standing out in the darkness, a white canvas bag slung over her shoulder. Lucia smiled in greeting and walked quickly across the dew-wet lawn, heading toward downtown. The sound of her shoes on the concrete echoed briefly before fading into the distant hum of traffic from the highway. That was the last time anyone saw her. The Milwaukee night grew quiet as the lake wind carried a chill down every street. The Halbrook apartment stayed lit late into the night, the wall clock ticking steadily, each sound deepening the silence in the room. Elena brewed another cup of tea, sat waiting, thinking her daughter had just lingered longer than planned. When the clock passed midnight, she began pacing to the window, looking down at the empty street and the haze obscuring distant lights. No sound of a car, no footsteps. A chill ran down her spine as she stared at the empty chair and the thin jacket Lucia had left behind. Time dragged heavily, and as the sky began to turn the gray of dawn, she knew something was wrong. In the kitchen, only the faint tick of the clock and her own hurried breathing remained. Finally, Elena picked up the phone, dialed the Milwaukee City Police, her voice trembling as she reported that her daughter had not come home. On the other end of the line, the duty officer asked her to stay calm and provide basic information: full name, age, physical description, and the last time Lucia was seen. The initial report was logged into the system at 4:15 a.m., classified as missing adult, unusual circumstances. 15 minutes later, a patrol car was dispatched to Brady Street. 2 officers knocked, confirmed the details, and entered the small apartment still lit from the night before. The room was tidy, quiet, with no signs of disturbance. On the kitchen table remained Lucia's glass of orange juice and notebook. Elena recounted everything in a steady but hoarse voice from lack of sleep. Lucia left around 8 p.m., wearing a red jacket and carrying a white canvas bag, saying she was going to a classmate's birthday party and would return soon. She had never stayed out overnight, had no mental health issues, and had never given her mother cause for worry from childhood onward. The officers took her statement, requested a photo of Lucia, and contacted Central Headquarters to report the case. By 5:40 a.m., the file was officially registered under Code Missing Person 84-312. At the East District Police Station, Detective Harold Dempsey, the lead investigator on duty that morning, took over the case. He opened a new file, read the brief report, and made a list of initial checks. One team was sent to canvass hospitals and emergency centers around the city. Another contacted train stations and bus depots. All results came back negative. No admissions matched the description. No female passengers fit the profile. By 9 a.m., Dempsey personally called Mrs. Halbrook to gather more details. From the conversation, he noted that Lucia had no boyfriend, no debts, no conflicts with anyone. Everything was normal until the night she vanished. He requested a list of classmates and coworkers from her part-time job. Within hours, police contacted 5 classmates. 3 confirmed Lucia had said she would attend the birthday party at an apartment near the 3rd Ward. But none had seen her arrive. This information narrowed the investigation to the route from her home to the party, just over a mile, but with a few dimly lit stretches bordering the lakeshore. Dempsey and his team surveyed the area, noting lighting conditions and foot traffic. There were no significant clues, but he believed the disappearance was not a simple case of leaving voluntarily. By noon, Dempsey issued a request to print Lucia's photo and description: female, 1955, light brown hair, blue eyes, wearing a red jacket, and carrying a white canvas bag. The information was circulated internally to all city police units and sent to hospitals, bus stations, and gas stations near Brady Street. By afternoon, official missing person flyers were posted at public bulletin boards, the university, libraries, and commercial areas downtown. Dempsey noted in his log, no evidence of leaving the city, no direct witnesses. Need to expand search within a 3-mile radius of the home. When he returned to the Halbrook apartment to update Elena, she was still by the window, clutching a cold cup of tea, eyes fixed on the silent street below. She asked softly, almost without hope, could she just be lost somewhere? Dempsey paused for a few seconds, then replied slowly, "We'll find her." That statement was recorded in the report as the first official commitment in the investigation into Lucia Halbrook's disappearance. The next morning, the official search was launched. By 8 a.m., patrol cars and local volunteers had gathered in front of Brady Street, where Lucia was last seen. A city map was spread across a police car hood, centered on the Halbrook home, with a 3-mile search radius marked in every direction. Detective Harold Dempsey assigned teams by area, one along Farwell Avenue, one toward Veterans Park, another along the Lake Michigan shore to the Hone Bridge. The morning was cool, with lake fog still low, limiting visibility and making the work difficult. Officers and volunteers were issued flashlights, gloves, evidence bags, and reporting forms. Dempsey joined the main team heading east, toward the quiet lakeside roads and abandoned warehouses. Police searched every lawn, checked trails and low bushes. They called Lucia's name repeatedly, the sound mixing with waves crashing against the break wall and the distant wail of ship horns. Near Veterans Park, an officer found a small scrap of fabric caught on a rusted iron fence, dark red. Dempsey ordered a halt, photographed it, and collected the sample by the book, marking the location on the map. A few dozen yards away, faint shoe prints in the damp soil, small, likely a woman's. These scattered clues were carefully documented, but not enough to conclude anything definitive. No drag marks, no other personal items. Dempsey directed the search to expand south, along the route Lucia might have taken to the 3rd Ward. Teams swept the lawns along Lafayette, checked narrow alleys between old houses. Another group was sent to the marina, questioning night shift security, but no one had seen a girl matching the description. By noon, the fog lifted, sunlight casting a harsh white glare on the lake, making the landscape feel barren and exposed. Searchers took a break, drank water, but spoke little. The air was quiet, broken only by radio chatter from police cars. Dempsey reviewed his notes. The clues lacked a connection, pointing to no specific location or action. He ordered the entire Veterans Park scene photographed and the red fabric sample sent to the lab for analysis. In the afternoon, the search expanded to northern residential areas with narrow alleys leading to the avenue. Police knocked on every door, asking residents what they had seen the night Lucia vanished. A few recalled hearing a truck engine between 8 and 9 p.m., but couldn't recall the direction. Another reported hearing brief voices that cut off abruptly, but wasn't sure whose. The information was recorded, but lacked verification value. As daylight faded, the teams returned to the starting point. Dempsey stood gazing at the lake, where gentle waves lapped the shore, reflecting the golden lights of the Honing Bridge. He felt as if the entire city was holding its breath, concealing something unspoken. Officers packed up equipment, marked the map with searched areas and those needing rechecks. The day's report read, "No confirmed traces of the missing subject. One red fabric scrap and small shoe prints collected, insufficient for conclusions." Volunteers left one by one, leaving only a few scattered police cars around the park. Dempsey walked slowly along the lakeside path, where the cold wind carried the scent of brackish water mixed with industrial smoke, making the air heavy. He paused at the iron fence where the fabric was found, looking around one last time before signaling his team to pack up. Night fell over Milwaukee, the city returning to its normal rhythm, while Lucia Halbrook's disappearance remained unsolved. The first search ended in silence, leaving behind only a few footprints in the sand and unanswered questions. The following day, the investigation shifted focus to gathering witness statements. After the fruitless search, Detective Harold Dempsey directed officers to revisit the entire route Lucia might have taken from Brady Street to the 3rd Ward, questioning every resident, shop owner, night worker, anyone who might have seen her on the evening of August 14th. Police split into small teams, going door to door along main routes. Some had heard of the disappearance on local radio, but couldn't confirm seeing the young woman. Near the McKinley Marina, a security guard named Roger Wilkes said he remembered seeing a girl matching the description, talking to an older man near the boat docks around 8:30 p.m. that night. According to him, they seemed to know each other, as there was no sign of argument. The girl wore a red jacket, hair tied up, and the man had a baseball cap and dark jacket. The conversation lasted a few minutes, then they walked back toward the neighborhood, and he stopped paying attention. Dempsey recorded the statement in detail, asked Roger to sketch the location and their direction of movement. He also verified the time with the marina's time clock. Roger's shift started at 8, lending some credibility to the account. However, the marina's security cameras had been out of service for a week due to electrical issues, making further verification impossible. A second team reached the intersection of Lafayette and Water Street, where a few shops and parking lots operated at night. A middle-aged man, owner of a car wash, said he saw a small beige pickup truck parked at the curb around 9 p.m. The engine was running, headlights dim, but no one was around. He thought it might belong to night shift workers, as the area was a hub for deliveries. When asked about the license plate, he shook his head. "I don't remember clearly, just that it had a faded old logo on the side door, looked like a plumbing company." Dempsey noted every detail. The issue was that the timing of the truck sighting didn't match the marina statement. If Lucia left home at 8, she couldn't be in two places nearly 2 miles apart at the same time. Officers tried checking registries of beige pickup trucks in the area, but the number was overwhelming. Over 200 legally operating in Milwaukee. Another witness, a barista at a small coffee shop near the intersection, said around 8:30 she saw a young woman pass by the window, but couldn't recall the face clearly. She only remembered the red jacket and quick gait, head slightly down as if avoiding the wind. This matched the neighbor's description of Lucia's outfit when she left home. Dempsey marked 3 potentially related points on the map: McKinley Marina, the car wash on Lafayette, and the coffee shop near the intersection. The distances weren't large, but the inconsistent timeline prevented a complete movement timeline. By late afternoon, he returned to the marina to inspect the area Roger described. The ground was covered in gravel and sand, with no usable traces left. A nearby street lamp had been broken for months, creating a large dark patch between abandoned warehouses. He imagined if Lucia had been talking there, a few moments of distraction could have allowed her to be pulled into this deserted area unnoticed. The thought was noted in his log with a brief line, "Location conducive to unusual activity." Dempsey ordered the tech team to photograph the entire area and file it in the case. By evening, all statements were compiled. 8 witnesses were recorded over 2 days, but only 2 provided specific information, both lacking corroborating evidence. No license plate, no images, no clear timeline matches. The statements were numbered, organized by location, and sent to the office for system entry. The day's report read, "Possibility victim was approached or stopped to talk with stranger, insufficient basis for verification. Beige pickup truck requires further tracing. It was dark when Dempsey left headquarters. Lake Michigan across the bridge, still lit by ship lights." He stood still for a moment before getting in his car, sensing clearly that this disappearance was slipping beyond a routine case. But in the final page of that day still held only a brief conclusion: no witnesses or vehicles directly linked to Lucia Halbrook identified. 3 days after the disappearance was reported, while search teams continued scouring the lakeshore area, new information reached the command center. A city maintenance worker called to report seeing a vehicle parked unusually in a vacant lot behind the old Schlitz Brewery, near the intersection of Cherry and 3rd Street. The area was deserted, with only a few abandoned warehouses and piles of scrap wooden barrels. Police immediately dispatched a field investigation team. When the patrol car arrived, the sun was high, its light slanting through the crumbling walls of the factory, revealing a weed-choked lot littered with debris. In the center stood a silver-gray Pontiac Lemons parked at an angle, its front wheels slightly sunk into the soft earth. The license plate matched Lucia Halbrook's registration. Dempsey, directly overseeing the scene, walked around the car, examining it closely. There were no skid marks or tire tracks indicating abrupt stopping, suggesting the vehicle was parked intentionally. The driver's door was unlocked, the handle covered in a thin layer of dust, with no signs of forced entry. Inside, the seats were neat, a white canvas bag placed on the passenger seat, a wallet inside containing a student ID, driver's license, and $37 in cash. The glove compartment held a few store receipts and a study notebook. The keys were not in the car. Dempsey ordered photographs of the entire scene from 4 angles and close-ups of the interior, noting weather, wind direction, and lighting conditions. He moved to the rear, checking the trunk, empty except for a neatly folded raincoat. No signs of a struggle or damage. The forensic technician dusted for fingerprints on the door handle, steering wheel, and gear shift, then labeled each print sequentially. All recovered prints matched Lucia's existing university records, with no other matching prints. The left window had a minor scratch, but nothing significant. The floor was dry, with no mud or foreign substances. On the back seat, a white handkerchief was folded neatly, with pale blue embroidered edges and small LH initials in the corner. The item was photographed, sealed in an evidence bag, and labeled E47B. Dempsey reviewed every detail in the report, searching for anomalies in the silent lot. He noted the parking spot was over 400 yards from the nearest main road, isolated by trees and stacked barrels, a place no one would stumble upon, especially at night. At the lot's edge, large truck tire tracks crossed the damp soil, but it was unclear if they were recent, as the area often saw material delivery vehicles. The technician photographed the tracks and measured the tread spacing for later comparison. As the team swept the surrounding area, they found a few shards of broken glass and rusted beer cans, likely left by the homeless. No clear biological evidence, no blood, hair, or fabric matching Lucia's jacket. Dempsey surveyed the old factory, its broken windows and cracked walls making it a labyrinth of abandonment. He wondered why the car was here, abandoned or staged. An officer reported the keys were not in the area, indicating the driver left deliberately. Dempsey ordered soil samples from the tires and undercarriage for lab analysis. Technicians numbered each sample and sealed them separately. All evidence was cataloged: the bag, wallet, notebook, handkerchief, and soil samples. After photography was complete, the Pontiac was towed to the police impound lot. The scene report stated, "Discovered August 17, 1984, Schlitz Factory Area, Milwaukee. Vehicle unlocked. Interior intact. No signs of forced entry. Key evidence, white handkerchief, code E40, 7B. That afternoon, in his office, Dempsey reviewed the photos. The car looked as if it had been parked the previous day, clean, untouched. This ruled out robbery or a traffic accident. He added to his investigation log, vehicle deviated from victim's usual route, parked in a secluded spot. Possible third-party involvement. The report was sent to superiors with a request to cordon off the factory area for further checks. That evening, an internal bulletin briefly informed neighboring units of the vehicle recovery in the Lucia Halbrook case. However, no nearby residents reported hearing or seeing unusual activity the night the car was left. The discovery site remained silent, as if the car had appeared in the empty lot on its own, waiting to be found. By day's end, as the tech team finished sealing evidence, Dempsey stood by the window overlooking the impound lot, where the Pontiac was secured. He knew that despite the first piece of evidence, the case remained in a vague limbo, not enough to piece together what happened to the young woman who left home on a summer evening. 3 days after Lucia Halbrook's Pontiac was brought to headquarters, the Milwaukee Police Department's forensic lab began unsealing evidence for analysis. Monday, August 20th, 1984, the weather was humid and cool. In the brightly lit lab, 3 forensic technicians and investigator Harold Dempsey were present to oversee the process. All wore protective gear, rubber gloves, and filtered masks. The car was positioned in the center of the floor, flanked by tool tables and scene photography equipment. The yellow evidence seal was intact, marked Evidence 84, 312. As the tape was removed, a stale odor filled the air. Dempsey stood silently, logging each unsealing step in the report. Technicians began collecting additional samples from the floor, seats, trunk, and undercarriage. Lucia's bag, wallet, and notebook were disassembled for final inspection. No signs of tampering. A new detail was noted: a gray stain on the brake pedal and floor beneath the driver's seat. Fine, sticky, not ordinary mud. The technician scraped a sample, sealed it in a vial labeled SL02, and sent it to the materials lab. Dempsey noted, possibly industrial soil or metallurgical dust. On the back seat, the key evidence, the white LH handkerchief, code E47B, was examined under magnification. A technician pointed out a faint brownish smudge on the inner edge, less than 2 centimeters long. The sample was cut, sealed for biological testing. Dempsey refrained from conclusions, but wrote, discoloration of unknown origin, possibly dried blood or organic material. In the trunk, technicians found a layer of metallic dust on the inner lid and 2 floor corners, odd, as there was no reason for such dust in a student's car. A handheld analyzer showed compounds of manganese, copper, and zinc, common in the Schlitz Brewery's former metalworking shop within the complex. By afternoon, preliminary lab results arrived. Soil from the undercarriage perfectly matched samples from the Schlitz factory, specifically the northern area with old storage vaults. The report stated, soil contains industrial ash, iron sulfide, and oil residue, not found in residential areas. This confirmed Lucia's car had been at the factory, even briefly. Reading the results, Dempsey fell silent. He recalled the morning of discovery: dry floor, tires barely sunk, clean soil, meaning the car was washed or moved before abandonment. Now, chemical evidence confirmed his suspicion. He wrote, "Vehicle deliberately moved from Schlitz to discovery site. Driver, likely familiar with northern industrial routes." That evening, fingerprints from the door handle and rearview mirror were run through comparison. Of 7 prints, 6 matched Lucia. The 7th, a smudged print on the mirror, was insufficient for identification but matched a male thumb pattern, contact angle, suggesting adjustment from the driver's seat. It was stored as VN07 for future comparison. On August 21st, the biological lab sent initial results on the fabric: no blood detected, but a dark hair fiber not matching Lucia's. The fiber was male, containing trace oils, potentially yielding epithelial cells for deeper analysis. Dempsey ordered it stored in cold storage, pending DNA technology, still experimental in 1984. By afternoon, the tech team completed documentation. Dempsey reviewed the evidence list: 47 items, 9 soil samples, 3 fibers, 7 fingerprints, and 1 biological item. He realized that among dozens of clues, the Schlitz brewery was the clearest lead. Everything pointed back there: soil, dust, movement traces. He took the city map, circled the northern factory area, and wrote briefly, "Primary scene likely within Schlitz brewery, need to screen 1984 personnel with access." Before leaving the lab, Dempsey paused for a final look at the Pontiac. The overhead lights reflected off the dusty silver-gray paint, making it seem like a survivor from another world. He sensed something waiting to be uncovered, not in the car anymore, but where it had been. That evening, in his report to superiors, he concluded with a decisive line: "Forensic results confirm Lucia Halbrook's vehicle was at Schlitz factory. Recommend expanding investigation to area and personnel present in August 1984. That line, typed into File 84-312, officially shifted the entire investigation from searching for the victim to tracing where the young woman vanished. After lab analysis showed the soil on Lucia's tires matched industrial mud around the Schlitz brewery, Detective Harold Dempsey decided to expand the investigation directly at the site. On the morning of August 21st, he and 6 officers arrived with a search warrant for the city-managed abandoned factory. The Schlitz complex was once a Milwaukee economic icon, but after closing in the late 1970s, it fell into disrepair, with only a few buildings leased as temporary storage. The rest were hollow concrete shells, broken windows, moss-covered walls, and rusted steel. The air was thick with dampness, mixed with old beer and grease. Dempsey sealed the main entrance with caution tape and set up a temporary command post at the east gate. Using old factory maps, he divided the area into 3 zones: the tank storage area, old offices, and northern workshop. The tech team was tasked with filming everything, while officers split to inspect each building. Footsteps echoed sharply in long corridors, light filtering only through shattered windows. The main workshop spanned nearly 2,000 square meters, its cracked concrete floor scattered with old tire marks and broken glass. A young officer called Dempsey to examine strange shoe prints in the thin dust near the entrance. The prints were large, size 10 or 11, with deep rubber treads, typical of work boots or military footwear. Dempsey measured, photographed, and cast the sole for comparison. A few meters away, a scrap of red fabric was wedged between a brick and the cement floor. When extracted, it was clearly synthetic, the weave common in women's fashion jackets. Dempsey recognized the color-matched descriptions of Lucia's jacket from the night she vanished. The fabric was sealed in a bag, labeled E52C, with exact time and location noted. Moving deeper, they found a small annex with peeling white paint and a loose locked door. Inside was an old office with a rotted wooden desk and empty filing cabinets. The floor had overlapping old shoe prints, hard to date. A rusted sign on the wall read "Security Office." Dempsey paused, studying it, then asked the accompanying officer, who handled security after the factory closed. The officer said Schlitz was contracted to a private security firm by the city in the early 1980s. Management records might be at the Department of City Services. Back at the temporary command post, Dempsey logged all findings in a preliminary report: large male shoe prints, red fabric, matching victim's clothing description, no signs of struggle, but clear human movement in the abandoned building. He ordered close-up photos and GPS coordinates for data storage. Before leaving, Dempsey stood in the workshop, surveying the empty walls, imagining a young woman brought here at night. The place was remote, vast, and ideal for hiding something undetected. That afternoon, at police headquarters, he began reviewing the security firm that managed Schlitz. After a few calls, records arrived: Midwest Property Security, contracted in 1981, terminated in 1983, when the factory fully closed. The attached employee list had 13 names, mostly seasonal workers. Dempsey scanned each, marking those still in the Milwaukee area. One name stopped him: Robert DeAngelis, a former city traffic officer, retired in 1979 for internal violations, then worked private security, including at Schlitz Brewery. Dempsey pulled DeAngelis's personnel file from archives. It showed he was born in 1945, served 7 years in the force, disciplined for mishandling evidence. After leaving, he worked private security with a valid license. His current address was in South Milwaukee, less than 10 miles from the factory. Dempsey underlined worked at Schlitz until September 1983 and wrote verify. He also requested city HR for more on security personnel before the contract ended. Of the list, only 2 had records: DeAngelis for administrative violations, another for domestic violence. But only DeAngelis had a police background, making him stand out. Dempsey printed copies, gave them to assisting investigators, and ordered confirmation of his current address and employment. Meanwhile, scene analysis results arrived. The red fabric from the factory matched the polyester in Lucia's jacket, purchased locally, verified by a receipt in her wallet. This wasn't direct proof of her presence, but evidence she or her clothing was at Schlitz. The report also confirmed the male shoe prints were from common security or worker boots. Dempsey compiled everything in an August 21st investigation summary. Asterisk victim's vehicle found 200 yards from factory. Asterisk tire soil matches Schlitz industrial mud. Asterisk factory scene has red fabric matching victim's clothing. Asterisk large male work boot prints. Asterisk one former worker, Robert DeAngelis, ex-police private security. The report was sent to command with a request to screen Schlitz-related personnel from the prior year. Before ending his shift, Dempsey reread the 13 names lingering on DeAngelis. He added a final note in his personal log: need to meet DeAngelis. Likely knows the area better than anyone. Outside, a light rain began in Milwaukee. Drops hitting the office window, blending with distant car horns, closing a long day where Lucia Halbrook's disappearance seemed to reveal only another layer of mystery. On the afternoon of August 22nd, after command approval, Detective Harold Dempsey issued a summons for Robert DeAngelis to appear at Milwaukee Police Headquarters for questioning. The 39-year-old man arrived on time, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray shirt and dark khaki pants. As a former officer, the interrogation process didn't faze him. Dempsey met him in Interrogation Room 2, a small space with a metal table, 2 chairs, and a tape recorder in the center. Opening the session, Dempsey explained the purpose. Police were investigating Lucia Halbrook's disappearance and needed to verify information related to the Schlitz factory where DeAngelis had worked security. DeAngelis was cooperative, nodding with a steady voice. He said he worked at Schlitz from 1981 to September 1983, patrolling the northern tank area and main warehouse. After the contract ended, he moved to security at a private warehouse near the Menominee port. On the night of August 14th, he claimed he was on duty there. Dempsey took notes, asked for his supervisor's name, time logs, and entry-exit records. DeAngelis immediately provided a handwritten work schedule showing a shift from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., signed by the manager, but without a company stamp. Dempsey glanced at it and asked, "Can you prove you were at the warehouse all night?" DeAngelis said he met 2 colleagues at the start of the shift, then worked alone in the guard booth. No one checked mid-shift. When Dempsey pressed for details about the warehouse location, he described it clearly, but when asked about that night's patrol log, he hesitated, checking his notebook. His log said 10:15 p.m., but the timesheet said 10:45. The 30-minute discrepancy caught Dempsey's attention. When asked why, DeAngelis shrugged. "I must have misremembered. It's not a big deal." The interrogation lasted nearly 2 hours. Dempsey asked about any connection to Schlitz after leaving. DeAngelis said he occasionally stopped by to see old equipment caretakers. He insisted he hadn't returned this year. When asked if he knew Lucia Halbrook, he denied it, saying he'd never heard the name or knew who she was. His demeanor was calm, voice firm, no signs of stress. Still, Dempsey noted a key detail: DeAngelis knew the Schlitz layout too well, even sealed off sections, knowledge only long-term workers would have. After the session, DeAngelis was asked to wait in the hallway while Dempsey and another investigator reviewed records. Reports confirmed DeAngelis was disciplined as an officer for evidence mishandling, but had no criminal record. His submitted timesheet was verified as authentic, but lacked electronic timestamps, as the company's automated system applied only to full-time staff. DeAngelis worked short-term contracts with manual logs, leaving a gap from 9:30 to 11 p.m., completely unverified. Dempsey considered the possibility that he had left his post to go somewhere, but to charge or detain more concrete evidence was needed. Witnesses, physical evidence, or biological traces. For now, there was nothing but suspicion. Before leaving the room, Dempsey turned and asked one final question. "Do you have any idea why the missing girl's car was found right near the Schlitz area, where you used to work?" DeAngelis looked straight ahead and answered briefly, "I don't know. Milwaukee has a lot of people coming and going. Anyone could park there." He left headquarters after nearly 3 hours, walking to the parking lot with a calm expression. Dempsey watched from the hallway, feeling the response had been too quick, too smooth. In the statement transcript, he added a personal note: cooperative, normal demeanor, no signs of evasion. However, shift time testimony inconsistent, requires further verification. The next day, Dempsey called the warehouse manager where DeAngelis worked. The manager confirmed DeAngelis was on the contract staff list, working the night shift from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., but couldn't recall specifically if he was there on the 14th, as shifts were flexible with no close supervision. He also noted the warehouse had no security cameras. The verification only reinforced the ambiguity. The summary report sent to superiors by week's end stated, Robert DeAngelis, 39, address in Greenfield, former police officer, currently contract security. Provided alibi on night shift at Menomonee Warehouse, verification timesheet valid, but no direct supervision, recorded times not fully consistent. No direct evidence linking DeAngelis to Lucia Halbrook. Dempsey reviewed the file, feeling restless. Everything checked out on paper, but instinct told him the man knew more than he let on. However, the law didn't allow holding someone on a hunch. He signed the temporary conclusion, stamped pending further investigation. DeAngelis's file was placed in a separate folder in his desk drawer, with a brief final note, subject to monitor, lacks legal basis for detention. Case paused pending new leads. The following weeks passed in the heavy silence of a stalled investigation. Since Robert DeAngelis was questioned and released, no new leads emerged. Initial witnesses were re-interviewed, but recalled no additional details. The Lake Michigan shoreline search was suspended after 2 weeks with no findings. The September 12, 1984, investigation report noted briefly, no additional evidence, no biological traces, no direct witnesses. Detective Harold Dempsey reread the entire file, from the mother's statement to the scene photos. Everything stopped at the same point. Lucia Halbrook vanished without a trace. Her car found intact, no signs of struggle, no evidence pointing to movement. He wrote in the internal summary, "Missing person, suspected foul play." The familiar term denoted a disappearance, likely involving criminal interference, but lacking evidence for prosecution. On September 14th, the Milwaukee Police Department officially suspended active investigation, shifting the case to passive monitoring. Dempsey held a brief meeting with his team, reading the conclusion, "All leads checked, no results. Continue monitoring community tips and unidentified body reports." The report was signed by the Chief of Investigations, stamped in red, confirming the end of the 1984 investigation phase. After the meeting, Dempsey and a technician packed the file for archive storage. Evidence was inventoried one last time: the canvas bag, wallet, notebook, store receipts, study book, white LH handkerchief, and tire soil samples. Each item was sealed in plastic, labeled per protocol. The white handkerchief, the only item with potential biological traces, was placed in a separate box, coded E47B, noted as potential trace evidence. Dempsey personally signed the sealing confirmation. He requested evidence storage in the low-temperature vault in the headquarters basement, reserved for samples with future testing potential. At the time, DNA technology was still unfamiliar to local police. All they could do was preserve per regulation, hoping one day technology would advance enough for answers. In the final summary to the chief's office, Dempsey outlined key points. Lucia Halbrook disappeared on the night of August 14, 1984. Vehicle found 3 days later, scene showed no struggle, no body. All witnesses and suspects interviewed, alibis verified, no elements sufficient for charges. He recommended maintaining the file in the National Missing Persons System for cross-referencing with unidentified female remains in northern Wisconsin or Michigan. A week later, File 84, another 12, was moved to the city's Criminal Data Center archive. The archivist signed receipt, assigned shelf number and sealing date. On the cover, bold text "Open Case," inactive was stamped. From then on, the Lucia Halbrook case was officially dormant. Dempsey kept a copy of the report in his desk drawer. Whenever he saw it, he recalled the mother's description of the red jacket and the matching fabric scrap from Schlitz. Those details proved nothing, but couldn't be ignored. In his personal log, he wrote one line: "No case truly ends until the person is found." He clipped the note into the photocopied file and closed it carefully. By late September, the department sent notice to the Halbrook family: "The official investigation into Lucia Halbrook's disappearance is temporarily concluded. The file remains active and may be reopened with new information." Upon receiving the letter, Helena Halbrook said nothing. She placed the paper on the table, folded it neatly, and stored it in a drawer with her daughter's photos. That night, the small Brady Street apartment stayed lit late, as it had every night since Lucia left. In the police office, File 84, 112, lay silent in a steel cabinet among hundreds of unsolved cases. On the label, Dempsey's signature and code E47B were the only remnants of an investigation that ended without answers. In the early 1990s, Milwaukee's criminal investigation system underwent major restructuring. Many unsolved cases from the 1970s, 1980s were reviewed for reclassification and storage under new standards. A unit dedicated to unresolved cases was formed, named the Cold Case Unit. Its goal was to compile, preserve, and periodically review backlog cases, those with signs of crime but lacking evidence or a victim. In the initial list of 128 transferred cases, Lucia Halbrook's File 84-312 appeared at number 47. On May 6, 1991, 2 Cold Case Unit staff visited the Central Police Headquarters basement archive to inspect and log transfers. They brought old file lists, sealed evidence boxes, and a new data scanner for coding. Lucia's file was retrieved from the third metal shelf, labeled Open Case, inactive. Inside were 5 evidence bags, a Polaroid photo envelope, and over 200 pages of investigation reports. handkerchief bag was sealed separately, with Detective Harold Dempsey's faded signature and code E47B still clear. The seal was checked, showing no signs of opening or damage. The transfer log noted, evidence condition, good, fully preserved, stable storage temperature. Recommend continued cold storage due to potential biological sample. Other soil and fabric samples were deemed no longer testable, but Dempsey, then reassigned, sent an additional note with the file, retained sample E47B, possible future biological testing. The typed note on yellow paper was taped inside the cover, a message for any future reviewer. DNA technology was emerging in forensics, but Milwaukee lacked a capable lab. All analyses were sent to Madison or Chicago, costly and reserved for active homicides. Thus, items like Lucia's handkerchief were stored in waiting. Cold case staff added, biological sample, not submitted for testing, not a homicide. File 84-312 was moved to the new unit's secure storage on the ground floor of the 8th Street Administrative Building. There, it was recoded under the cold case system as CC91047 and entered into the city's first electronic storage software. Basic info was summarized. Lucia Halbrook, female, 19, disappeared August 14, 1984. Vehicle recovered, no body. Investigator, Harold Dempsey. Status, unresolved. That brief description was all that remained publicly of the girl who vanished nearly 7 years earlier. For Dempsey, the lead investigator, transferring the file to cold case closed his final responsibility. In his 1991 personal log, on the last page, he wrote the familiar line, File 84-312, transferred 5-6, evidence E47B, in cold storage. If science advances, test for DNA. The note was later photocopied into the official archive. In subsequent years, the cold case unit operated with limited staff, mainly conducting periodic file reviews. Every 3 years, the team inventoried, reopened evidence boxes, checked conditions, and updated catalogs. Lucia Halbrook's file stayed in place, shelf 14, between 2 other cases from the era. Each inventory noted, no change. Sample E47B. Seal intact, well preserved. In the 1994 summary report, Lucia's case was listed in the group, potential for re-examination with low-cost biological testing technology. DNA storage was still new, not widespread beyond homicides. But Dempsey believed the handkerchief held answers. In an internal meeting, he told the young archivist briefly, if anyone asks, keep it, don't move it out. Time passed, and Dempsey retired early in 1996. He sent the cold case unit a short thank you letter and a final reaffirmation about Lucia Halbrook. I'm no longer investigating, but this case still has something unfinished. The letter was clipped into the original file, becoming supplemental documentation. By the late 1990s, as the National Missing Persons Database was upgraded, Lucia Halbrook's file remained open. No results. Sample E47B stayed in cold storage with hundreds of others, checked quarterly for temperature. Archivists joked that the Red Jacket Girl's little box was one of the oldest intact pieces of evidence. Few knew, or perhaps cared, that the small box still held an undecoded part of the story. Harold Dempsey once insisted, no case truly ends until the person is found. 32 years had passed since Lucia Halbrook was reported missing. Milwaukee had changed. The old Schlitz factory turned into a new commercial district, and most involved in the original investigation had retired or passed away. In spring 2016, Wisconsin's Criminal Data Overhaul Program required reviewing all pre-1995 cold case files to identify those testable with new generation DNA technology. At Milwaukee PD, the task fell to Detective Paul Hale, 39, experienced in complex civil cases and leading the old file analysis team. In the first days of the review, Hale worked in a room with hundreds of dusty, orderly files, heavy with history. He read each summary, marking cases with recoverable biological evidence. Most 1980s files were worthless, degraded samples, improper seals, or lost traces. On the fifth day, he found a thin file, CC901047, labeled Lucia Halbrook. Missing person 1984. Suspected foul play. In the corner, Harold Dempsey's faded signature remained. Inside, the first page had a taped note, retain sample E47B for DNA testing when possible. The short line immediately caught Hale's attention. He took the file to his desk and read continuously for nearly 2 hours. The detailed reports were intact. Vehicle discovery, Schlitz factory area, red fabric scrap, witness list, and especially the white, LH handkerchief from Lucia's car seat. Archive logs confirmed the sample was sealed, cold stored on the ground floor. Hale noted in the margin, biological sample, intact. To him, this was a rare opportunity. Among hundreds of decades-old disappearances, few retained testable evidence. That afternoon, Hale met the evidence vault lieutenant for direct inspection. The storage room was secure, temperature low, with automated monitoring. When the steel door opened, hundreds of small boxes appeared, each coded and sealed. Hale located shelf 84312 E47B. The clear plastic box was sealed since 1984, with Dempsey's faded signature on the tape. Inside was a small nylon bag with a neatly folded white handkerchief, blue embroidered edges now faded. He checked the log, verified signatures, and confirmed seal intact. No breach. Hale requested file reopening for retesting. The sample was photographed, logged for transfer to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. The request stated, analyze DNA via STR technology and search for biological traces, cross-referenceable in CODIS. The log was signed and stamped April 12, 2016. Placing the box on the verification table, Hale felt its symbolic weight, not just evidence, but unanswered memories from the 1980s. In his work log, he wrote, sample E47B may yield results if epithelial cells or organic material remain. Request testing within 30 days. Beside the note, he copied Lucia's portrait from the original file and stared at it. A 19-year-old with brown hair, a sidelong glance, and a slight smile, frozen at the moment she vanished. The following week, Hale delved deeper into old documents. He reread Dempsey's reports, the meticulous margin notes, sensing the care of a prior generation investigator. Many details remained relevant. The Schlitz area, male shoe prints, old security staff list. Though aged, the records were precise, giving a full picture. What stood out was the single item rated biological potential. Most disappearances from that era lacked such samples. On April 15, with formal transfer approved, sample E47B was sent by secure vehicle to the central lab in Madison. The container was sealed in an insulated case with a chain of custody certificate for legal integrity. Hale signed as transferor at 9:45 a.m. He watched from the window as the white forensic van left the lot. In that moment, he felt a thread reconnecting two generations of investigators, Dempsey in 1984 and himself over 30 years later. That afternoon, Hale submitted a report to command. Original evidence confirmed intact. Sample E47B sent for new generation DNA analysis. Results expected in 45-60 days. The report included images of the old seal, stored in the department's electronic system. As night fell, he stayed at his desk, rereading the old file's opening. Lucia Halbrook, born 1965, disappeared August 14, 1984. Suspected criminal interference. 32 years, enough for witnesses to forget, traces to fade, but perhaps one thing remained: the patience of those in this line of work. Before leaving, Hale added a line to his log. Restarting. File 84312. Opened for DNA review. The brief entry marked the moment Lucia Halbrook's disappearance, buried in cold storage for over 3 decades, was officially brought back into the light of a new investigation. Results from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab returned to Milwaukee in early June 2016, nearly 8 weeks after sample E47B was received. The 12-page report included microscope images and DNA sequence charts. The first line of the conclusion was bolded. Sample E47B contains male DNA, blood type O+, no match with victim Lucia Halbrook's profile. Reading that line, Detective Paul Hale paused for a long time. This was the first time since 1984 that Lucia's case had tangible evidence of another person's presence. The report continued, no blood traces, stain likely epithelial skin cells, DNA sequence integrity sufficient for individual identification if comparison sample available. A chart showed 82% quality against full sequence standards. Hale called the lab immediately, requesting cross-checks to rule out storage contamination. 3 days later, confirmation, no cross-contamination. Male DNA in sample is independent. The next step was CODIS, the National Criminal DNA Database. The sample was coded and submitted through legal channels. It took 3 days for automated retrieval. When results appeared on screen, Hale saw the familiar line every investigator dreads. No match found. No records in the system matched the DNA from Lucia Halbrook's handkerchief. He leaned back in his chair, silent for a few minutes. After more than 3 decades, the case seemed to have an opening, but once again it halted at the familiar wall. No match, no identity. However, unlike 1984, technology now offered a new path: genetic genealogy. In recent years, cases in California and Oregon had been solved by tracing distant biological relatives through GED Match, a database where people voluntarily share genetic data to find ancestors. Hale had read many reports on this method and understood it might be the only chance to advance with Lucia Halbrook's DNA sample. On June 16, he submitted a formal request to the state forensic lab for permission to use genealogical analysis on the unidentified male DNA. The request was approved after 2 weeks, with the condition of strict adherence to civilian privacy protocols. The sample was transferred to a specialized lab in Madison, where technicians isolated and digitized gene sequences for comparison with millions of GED Match user profiles. The process took nearly 3 weeks, as data had to be encrypted and matched segment by segment. In late July, a preliminary report arrived. Genealogical analysis indicates several individuals with distant genetic links, 3rd or 4th degree, to sample E47B. These individuals bear the surname DeAngelis, residing in Illinois. The family name stunned Hale. DeAngelis instantly surfaced in his memory from investigator Dempsey's file over 30 years earlier. Robert DeAngelis, former police officer, security guard at the Schlitz factory. Hale reopened the original file, flipping to the potential suspect section. Dempsey had noted Robert DeAngelis, 39 at time of interview, provided incomplete alibi, insufficient evidence for prosecution. He reread the passage, then cross-referenced it with the new GED Match data. The genetic link wasn't direct enough to confirm identity, but sufficient to prove the DNA on the handkerchief belonged to someone distantly related to a branch of the DeAngelis family in Illinois. For certainty, Hale contacted the lab's genealogist, Dr. Clara Jensen. In a video call, she explained, "We identified the link through characteristic gene segments on chromosomes 9 and 16. Similarity of 1.8%, equivalent to distant cousins, possibly third cousins, or descendants. If your old file mentions a DeAngelis, start there." Hale carefully noted every figure, thanked her, and ended the call. That night, he sat in the empty office, opening 2 files side by side, the new DNA report and Dempsey's 1984 investigation. Everything began to align in a strange way. The male DNA, DeAngelis surname, Schlitz factory, handkerchief, E47B. Fragments separated for 3 decades, suddenly connected into a faint but clear direction. Hale knew this wasn't prosecutable evidence, but enough to launch a new verification chain. The next morning, he sent an internal summary to command: male DNA identified on evidence, E47B, no CODIS match. GED match genealogy shows distant genetic relation to DeAngelis family in Illinois. Recommend retrieving personnel and kinship records for Robert DeAngelis. The cold case unit commander read the report, looked up and asked, "Are you sure this is the lead to follow? It's only distant relatives." Hale replied briefly, "Yes, but in this case, everything started with DeAngelis and may end there too." He left the meeting room carrying Dempsey's thin, worn file. In the long police headquarters hallway, morning light filtered through frosted glass, casting a thin dust layer over the black and white photo of Lucia he held. In the photo's corner, the scrawled note, E47B, keep for future testing, now seemed a strange prophecy. That evidence, which Dempsey had preserved on a hunch, had truly opened a new path for a case thought dormant for over 30 years. Immediately after the genealogical results pointed to the DeAngelis family in Illinois, Detective Paul Hale began searching Milwaukee Police Department personnel records from 1970-1980. Data from that era was mostly paper, stored in the city's old administrative archive. He contacted HR for access to expired files. The archivist, an elderly clerk, recalled that many documents had been preliminarily digitized but untouched for decades. After 3 days, Hale received a scanned PDF from the original, coded MPD staff's 1979 DEA 0421. Opening it, Robert J. DeAngelis's name appeared on the first line. According to the file, DeAngelis was born in 1945 in Racine, Wisconsin, joined the Milwaukee Police in 1968, and served in downtown patrol. Initial evaluations showed competence, with commendations for armed suspect arrests. However, from 1977 onward, records noted minor infractions, improper conduct, unauthorized use of department vehicles, and an evidence handling violation. Finally, in November 1979, he was forced to resign by the disciplinary board for ethical breach, loss of public trust. Details were vague, with only an internal note, found using evidence from holding, not criminal, but severe policy violation. After dismissal, DeAngelis briefly left Milwaukee, then returned to work private security, including a contract at Schlitz Brewery, exactly as investigator Harold Dempsey noted in 1984. Hale paused long at this section, then opened the personnel and Lucia Halbrook case files side by side. Details aligned. Fired in 1979, Schlitz Security 1981, 1983, and in 1984, Lucia vanished. Her car found near the factory where he worked. He checked DeAngelis's 1980s residency via tax and voter records. City Hall data showed he lived on Brady Street, less than half a mile from the Halbrook apartment. The coincidence felt like past pieces snapping together. His notebook entry was just 2 words, too close. To strengthen the case, Hale contacted state HR archives for more on DeAngelis's police service. A 1978 report noted, Officer DeAngelis cautioned for inappropriate surveillance of female civilian during East Side residential patrol. No details, just an internal reminder. Reading this, Hale was nearly certain Dempsey's 1984 hunch was right, only lacking scientific tools then. That afternoon, Hale met cold case team leader Lieutenant Sarah Morton to present findings. He spread 2 files on the table, one from Milwaukee PD, one for Lucia Halbrook, and pointed out alignments. DeAngelis forced out in 1979, Schlitz Security 1981, 1983. Residence overlapped victim's school route. Handkerchief E47B, DNA distantly related to Illinois DeAngelis family. At 1984 disappearance, DeAngelis was 39, fit, familiar with industrial area. Morton was silent for minutes, then asked, "Any direct evidence?" Hale answered honestly, "Not yet. But this is the only lead with scientific and logical basis." Morton nodded, authorizing deeper verification of DeAngelis's identity and current status. Hale returned to his office, searching the latest federal residency records. Results showed Robert J. DeAngelis, born 1945, registered in Greenfield, Wisconsin, South Milwaukee suburb, still alive. Occupation retired security. 2015 tax data confirmed pension and living alone. Staring at the screen, Hale felt a chill, the name from the old file now clear, in the same city, less than 10 miles from where Lucia lived. Before leaving, he reread Dempsey's 1984 final report, where the veteran wrote in red pen, Robert DeAngelis, inconsistent alibi, insufficient grounds to hold. Over 30 years later, the words carried weight, as if waiting for someone to finish the unfinished. Hale closed the file, stood, and wrote in his work log. Re-identify suspect Robert J. DeAngelis, born 1945, ex-officer fired 1979. Lived near victim, worked at Schlitz Brewery. Recommend identity verification and DNA comparison sample. As he turned off the office light, the window reflected fading sunset over the worn file cover. Dempsey's lines and Hale's new numbers coexisted on the same page, 2 generations united. From a disappearance thought forgotten, the man once in a police uniform was returning to the investigation center, no longer a witness, but the prime suspect. After confirming Robert J. DeAngelis lived in Greenfield, Detective Paul Hale immediately submitted to Cold Case Command a plan for surveillance and indirect DNA sample collection for comparison. The surveillance order was approved on August 2, 2016, with strict secrecy due to the subject's former police status. A 4-person team was formed, led by Hale, coordinating with 2 Wisconsin state investigation agents. Their task: observe, legally collect discarded items from DeAngelis, avoid direct contact until scientific verification. DeAngelis, then 71, lived alone in a ranch-style house on the edge of Greenfield, about 10 miles from downtown Milwaukee. Neighbors described him as quiet, minimally social, regimented, reading the paper on the porch each morning, walking to a nearby coffee shop each afternoon. He remained fit, with short gray hair, occasionally wearing sunglasses on cloudy days. Hale's team began observation on August 5. A civilian pickup was parked across the street, dashboard camera recording all exterior activity. The first day revealed nothing beyond the elderly man's routine. By the third day, Hale noted DeAngelis smoked Marlboro Reds, extinguishing butts in a plastic ashtray and discarding them in the curb trash each evening. Per legal protocol, the team couldn't collect from private property, but could take trash placed at the curb for pickup. On the evening of August 8, after DeAngelis turned off lights and set out the bag, 2 agents discreetly approached once he was inside. Wearing gloves, they collected all dry cigarette butts in a sealed plastic bag, coded RJD01. The bag also contained a paper coffee cup and damp napkins, all carefully secured and sent to the lab that night. Samples were delivered to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab under Hale's direct supervision. Technicians isolated butts, extracting epithelial cells and saliva for gene sequencing. The process took nearly 2 weeks. During the wait, Hale maintained passive surveillance, avoiding exposure. He knew one small mistake, and DeAngelis, experienced in the field, would notice. The man continued normally, driving an old Ford, occasionally stopping at a convenience store for papers and cigarettes. No unusual behavior. On August 22, preliminary results arrived encrypted to Hale. The lab email had 2 lines. DNA sequence full match, 99.98% similarity to sample E47B. Hale reread it, heart racing, then called the examiner for confirmation. On the line, Dr. Clara Jensen, the genealogist, said briefly, "No doubt, Paul, trash DNA matches the 1984 handkerchief perfectly." He was silent for seconds, then activated internal recording to read aloud. August 22, 2016, received results from Wisconsin State Crime Lab. Sample RJD01, absolute match with evidence E47B. DNA bearer is Robert J. DeAngelis. His voice was hoarse but clear. This was the first undeniable scientific proof the man questioned over 30 years ago was at Lucia Halbrook's disappearance scene. Immediately, Hale drafted a 7-page summary to Cold Case Command, and the Milwaukee County DA. It detailed sample collection, chain of custody, and test results. The final page proposed, based on DNA results, sufficient grounds to request search and arrest warrant for suspect Robert J. DeAngelis for investigation of kidnapping, homicide, and obstruction of justice. That afternoon, the DA's office called an emergency meeting. Legal representatives reviewed every document, verifying sample collection legality. Since trash was placed in public curbside, it violated no privacy per federal precedent, fully legal. County DA Linda Carver said briefly after reading, "We've waited 32 years for this moment. Prepare the warrant application tonight." While legal drafted documents, Hale and team continued Greenfield surveillance. That evening, DeAngelis sat on the porch smoking as usual, unaware his every move was now in a reopened criminal file. At 9 a.m. the next day, Milwaukee County Court approved search and arrest warrants for Robert J. DeAngelis, based on DNA matching Lucia Halbrook evidence. Holding the official warrant, Hale sat silently in his car, looking through the window at the small house at the end of the quiet street. He knew the next step would end 3 decades of waiting, but also reveal truths that could change how the old case was viewed. As the sun rose high, light hit the faded Greenfield subdivision sign. Hale activated his recorder, speaking clearly. Time 9:40 a.m., August 23, 2016. Search and arrest warrant for Robert J. DeAngelis effective. Cold case team to execute within 24 hours. Before departing, he reopened the photo of evidence E47B, the white LH handkerchief preserved over 30 years. From that seemingly meaningless cloth, the entire case had returned to light. In the day's final report, Hale wrote, "Surveillance concluded, trash legally collected. DNA results, absolute match with E47B. Search and arrest warrants obtained for Robert J. DeAngelis." At the bottom, he underlined a non-standard line, 32 years. Dempsey was right. That evening, in the cold case unit headquarters, team members sat around the table, awaiting deployment orders. Outside, light Milwaukee rain fell, streetlights shimmering on glass. Hale looked at the map, circling DeAngelis's address in red. As the clock struck 10 p.m., he closed his notebook, stood, voice low but firm. "We start here." On the morning of April 24, 2018, nearly 2 years after the arrest warrant was issued, the final execution plan for Robert J. DeAngelis was launched. The delay wasn't due to errors but federal coordination with the DOJ to validate DNA evidence and secure nationwide approval. With procedures complete, Milwaukee entered a cold morning, thin fog covering the Greenfield suburb where DeAngelis's ranch house sat quietly on Deadwood Drive. At 6:40 a.m., 2 unmarked police vehicles departed cold case headquarters. In the driver's seat, Detective Paul Hale reviewed the arrest warrant boldly titled, "State of Wisconsin versus Robert Joseph DeAngelis. Suspicion of homicide, first degree." Below the DA's signature, based on DNA matching evidence, E47B, Lucia Halbrook case. At 7 a.m. sharp, 4 patrol cars and 2 tactical units stopped over 200 yards from the suspect's home. The team wore bulletproof vests, maintaining absolute silence. DeAngelis, now 73, was believed to live alone, unarmed. The order was read over radio. Then the team approached in a triangle formation, 2 circling back, 3 advancing front. Hale followed, in command position. When the team knocked, no immediate response. After seconds, a hoarse voice. "Who's there?" "Milwaukee City Police, Mr. DeAngelis. We have a search warrant and arrest warrant." A short silence. Then heavy footsteps, the deadbolt clicking. The silver-haired man in a gray sweater and pajama pants stood in the doorway. His eyes flickered, as if understanding everything before hearing the warrant read. Hale stepped forward, reading each line of the document clearly, while 2 officers moved in for a pat-down. DeAngelis didn't resist. He raised his hand slowly, allowing cuffing. When Hale asked, "Do you know why we're here?" he replied curtly, "I guess it's about the old thing." The statement, brief but cold, was recorded verbatim. After securing the scene, forensics entered for the search. The small house was simple, unusually clean. On the TV shelf, books on Milwaukee police history were neatly aligned. The back bedroom was tidy, bed smoothly made, no signs of another person. However, in an old wooden wardrobe, investigators found a dark wooden box, about 30 by 20 centimeters, with a simple lock. DeAngelis showed no reaction as they opened it in front of him. Inside was a stack of old Polaroids, mostly young women, in normal poses, but with unnatural expressions, some visibly scared, others seemingly candid. Beneath the photos were small jewelry items, silver ring, pendant, earrings. One was a University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee student ID, labeled L. Halbrook. All evidence was sealed, coded RJD Home, 01. A technician found a thin red thread stuck to the box bottom, material matching the 1984 Schlitz factory fabric sample. When asked about the box's contents, DeAngelis answered slowly. "Old work mementos, I kept them to remember people I met." Hale stared at him long, but said nothing. Each item was bagged, photographed, coordinates logged. Agents then searched the backyard shed, finding boxes of police magazines, notebooks, and an unregistered dusty handgun. By 9:15 a.m., the search concluded. DeAngelis was let out in his pajamas and worn slippers. Neighbors gathered, watching. Some recognized the kind old man who mowed his lawn each morning, now escorted to a police car. One witness whispered to a local reporter, "He was a cop once, who'd believe it?" Media were barred from details, but news of the arrest spread across Milwaukee by noon. At Central Police Headquarters, DeAngelis was taken to Interrogation Room 3. Cameras rolled, 2 officers guarded outside. Hale entered with a detention order and DNA results copy. He read Miranda rights slowly. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court." DeAngelis listened, eyes unblinking, face nearly expressionless. When Hale placed the file on the table and opened the handkerchief photo, he smirked slightly, nodding as if acknowledging something unspoken. Formal interrogation hadn't started, but DeAngelis was already media's focus. Local channels ran briefs. 73-year-old suspect arrested in 1984, Lucia Halbrook disappearance. Milwaukee's longest cold case. Meanwhile, forensics finalized evidence inventory. The wooden box, Polaroids and student ID were sent to the lab for fingerprint and supplemental DNA analysis. By afternoon, DeAngelis was transferred to Milwaukee County Jail, awaiting formal questioning the next morning. Hale sat in his office, reading his summary report. Arrest date April 24, 2018. Suspect Robert J. DeAngelis, born 1945, Greenfield resident. Seized evidence, wooden box with Polaroids, women's jewelry, L. Halbrook student ID. Status suspect detained. No resistance. At the bottom, he added an unofficial line, 34 years, the handkerchief found its owner. He closed the file, set it on the desk, and gazed silently through the glass as sunset fell over the city. In that quiet air, the Lucia Halbrook case, once a forgotten wound, had finally brought the man once in a police uniform back into the light of justice. The formal interrogation of Robert J. DeAngelis took place on the morning of April 25, 2018, in Interrogation Room 3 at the Milwaukee Police Department. The small room had gray walls, a metal table in the center, and a fixed camera on a stand. Detective Paul Hale led the session, observed by County Prosecutor Linda Carver and the public defender assigned to the suspect. At 9:15 a.m., Hale began by restating Miranda rights. DeAngelis nodded, speaking in a hoarse voice. "I understand, and I'll talk, as long as you don't interrupt." He sat upright, hands on the table, showing no fear. Hale started with a simple question. "Did you know Lucia Halbrook?" DeAngelis paused for a long time, then answered slowly. "I met her once, that night." The response silenced the room for seconds. Hale continued. "Specifically when?" "Summer, 1984. She was walking alone near Veterans Park. I stopped my car to check on her. We talked for a few minutes. He emphasized, I didn't harm her. I just gave her a ride for a short distance. Hale noted it, voice calm. Gave her a ride? Then why is your DNA on evidence in her car, the handkerchief E47B? DeAngelis frowned, staring directly. I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe she lent me the handkerchief, or left it in my car and forgot. I was a cop. I know how you guys steer the story. Hale didn't respond, only placing the handkerchief photo and DNA report on the table. He read each word clearly. DNA on evidence matches Robert J. DeAngelis's biological sample. Absolutely. Probability 1 in 10 billion. DeAngelis fell silent. He looked down at the paper, fingers trembling slightly. For nearly a minute, no one spoke. Finally, he looked up, voice softer. I didn't kill her. I didn't mean to. The words made Hale grip his pen tighter. He asked, What do you mean by didn't mean to? DeAngelis looked away from the paper, at the white wall. She panicked. I just wanted to talk. Then she screamed. Tried to run. I held her back, and things got out of control. His voice choked for a moment, then continued, I didn't want to, I swear. Hale leaned forward, voice steady. What did you do with the body afterward? DeAngelis took a deep breath, hands clasped. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I drove around the Schlitz area, where I used to work. I knew there was an old basement under the north building. Used to be steel tank storage, abandoned after closure. I left her there. He paused, voice nearly a whisper. No one goes down there anymore. The basement door locks from outside. Hale stared into his eyes. You're talking about the North Schlitz factory basement, sealed in 1983? DeAngelis nodded. Yes, access through a steel door covered by plywood. I dragged the body down, covered it with old tarps. He looked away, adding slowly, I left her jacket too, red. Prosecutor Carver immediately requested map confirmation. A Schlitz area map was placed on the table. DeAngelis's hand shook slightly as he circled the north building, labeling tank storage B. Sublevel. He pinpointed the basement exactly, entry via a side corridor in back. All actions were recorded on camera. When asked why he stayed silent for years, DeAngelis only said, Who'd believe an ex-cop telling the truth? I thought it would stay buried with her. An emergency search warrant was approved by county court that afternoon. On the morning of April 26, 2018, the old Schlitz factory on 3rd Street was fully cordoned off. Police set up security barriers and crime scene, do not enter, signs around the north building, where suspect Robert J. DeAngelis had marked the body's location on the map. The damp, cold Milwaukee early spring air lingered among peeling concrete walls. Under temporary industrial lights, white-suited forensic staff descended the basement via a rusted steel door, just pried open by crane. The small basement, over 3 meters deep, had a floor covered in dry mud and torn nylon tarps. The stench of mold, mixed with rust and moss, was overwhelming. Detective Paul Hale was on scene early, standing beside State Forensic Lab Director Dr. Clara Jensen, who had handled the case's DNA testing. Jensen directed excavation. Every item found must be marked, photographed, positioned, and preserved in soil layer structure. 2 forensic technicians began scraping mud layers with small trowels. After just 15 minutes, a thin nylon tarp edge clearly emerged, buried deep in soil, under rotted wood and rusted cans. Under the lights, a dark red fabric strip protruded from the tarp edge. The team stopped. Jensen signaled for photos, then ordered a 2-meter perimeter expansion to avoid damaging structure. As the tarp was gently lifted, the faint outline of a human skeleton appeared. The skull tilted right, long hair mostly decomposed, only a few strands stuck in dirt. Around the neck, remnants of a rotted fabric cord. A tattered red jacket covered the back, material matching descriptions of Lucia Halbrook's jacket the night she vanished. No one spoke, only the scratch of pens in notebooks and camera clicks. Hale looked into the pit, relief and weight flooding him at once. Over 34 years, Lucia Halbrook was finally found. Jensen demanded absolute care. Bone fragments were numbered, sealed in anti-moisture bags. Surrounding soil was sampled for parallel analysis. As the team cleared the remaining tarp, they found a small rusted silver ring engraved faintly, ELH inside. This evidence was sealed separately, coded SL 2018-07. Deeper in the soil, a white fabric scrap, possibly undergarment or cloth, and a clear plastic button, all logged in the scene report. While forensics continued, Hale stepped back a few meters, surveying the scene. The narrow basement had a low ceiling, cracked cement walls. He noted DeAngelis's confession matched reality, exactly, location, depth, covering materials. In the corner, small wheel marks, possibly from an old cart. Everything indicated the victim was transported here, not dragged, he wrote. Victim deliberately concealed in former workplace, professional trace erasure, consistent with law enforcement knowledge. By midday, all remains were excavated and brought to the surface. 6 sealed bags were laid on a white tarp, 5 with bones, 1 with accompanying evidence. Forensics cleaned each piece with specialized solution, preliminary on-site checks. Based on bone structure and size, Jensen confirmed, female age 18-25, height approximately 5'5", matches victim Lucia Halbrook. Absolute confirmation required DNA from bone, compared to Lucia's 1984 stored hair sample. That afternoon, samples were transported by secure vehicle to the Madison lab. Hale signed chain of custody confirmation and attached a preliminary report. Human remains, likely Lucia Halbrook, found at suspect-designated location, Schlitz factory storage basement, coordinates 43°02 N, 87°54 W. As the convoy left, he stood at the scene, watching. In the fading afternoon light, the old factory looked like a massive concrete corpse, holding secrets just revealed. 4 days later, DNA results returned to Milwaukee PD. The 8-page report's first line stated clearly, bone sample SL 2018-07 fully matches Lucia Halbrook's DNA profile. Error probability less than 1 in 1 billion. Official conclusion, remains found in Schlitz basement were Lucia Halbrook, missing since 1984. The news was first shared with the victim's mother, Elena Halbrook, now over 70. When Hale visited, she was silent for a long time, then whispered, "I've waited half my life for this answer." The old Brady Street apartment was unchanged, Lucia's college photos still on the shelf. Hale left without knowing what to say, only his card and a promise, now she's no longer considered missing. On April 30th, police held a brief press conference at Central Headquarters. The spokesperson announced, thanks to modern DNA technology and suspect confession, Milwaukee PD has recovered Lucia Halbrook's remains, missing since 1984. The case file is officially reclassified from missing person to homicide investigation. That phrase, homicide investigation, marked the end of over 3 decades as a cold case. In the summary report to the state DA's office, Hale wrote, evidence E47B and 2016 DNA sample were decisive. Victims' remains excavated at suspect-indicated location. DNA results confirm Lucia Halbrook's identity. Case status shifted from missing to homicide. Finishing the signature, he set the pen down slowly. In the quiet cold case unit office, the only sounds were the pen touching paper and wind whistling through the glass. 34 years from the white LH handkerchief to bones brought to light, a disappearance's journey had finally reached truth. On the report's final line, Hale added a non-regulation sentence, the only conclusion he felt right. Lucia Halbrook, located, identified, returned. The official forensic report on Lucia Halbrook's excavated remains was completed in mid-May 2018, less than 3 weeks after identity confirmation. The Wisconsin State Crime Lab, under Dr. Clara Jensen, fully examined bones, fabric, and accompanying evidence. Results opened with a short, firm statement, cause of death, severe cranial trauma from blunt force impact, consistent with intentional assault. The report also noted estimated time of death aligned with the night Lucia vanished, between 9 p.m. and midnight on August 14, 1984. Analysts found a 7.3 centimeters crescent-shaped fracture on the occipital skull, irregular, typical of impact by a hard object with a rounded edge, possibly a metal handle or flashlight. Bone structure showed force from behind left, victim with no defensive reaction. This matched Robert DeAngelis's confession. He said he held her back. She struggled and fell, hitting her head on metal. However, per expert Jensen, the depth and skull base fracture indicated a blow or fall strong enough for instant death, not just accident. Beyond head trauma, no defensive bone fractures, no knife or bullet wounds, forensics found no sexual assault evidence due to complete soft tissue decomposition, but scene factors indicated control before death, faint symmetrical wrist marks, likely tied with fabric. The red fabric from the basement matched Lucia's jacket material, found beneath the body, proving she fell or was placed while still wearing it. Report summary: bone condition and scene indicate victim assaulted with blunt object, instant unconsciousness, then death from severe cranial trauma. Behavior determined, intentional, organized. These findings strongly reinforced DeAngelis's prior confession. Despite his unintentional claim, Hale and prosecutor Linda Carver read every line closely. Near-perfect alignment between suspect description and forensic data made the case scientifically complete, rare for a 3-decade cold case. In evidence analysis, the lab listed 27 items total, including white handkerchief E47B, red jacket fragment, silver ring, fabric threads, cigarette butts, Polaroids, and L. Halbrook student ID, all cross-referenced for DNA and fingerprints. Results showed DeAngelis's DNA on 3 items: handkerchief, cigarette butts, and inner silver ring edge. The student ID had a partial right index fingerprint match, error probability 1 in 6 million. Inner wooden box photo container also bore the same biological traces. All data compiled into a comparison chart, signed by Dr. Jensen, no doubt remains about suspect's connection to victim evidence. In the May 18 internal meeting, Hale presented results to Cold Case Command. The screen showed evidence images from 1984 DNA, 2016 trash sample, to 2018 excavation. He said briefly, "All paths converge on one person. From evidence DNA to confession, everything matches perfectly. We have solid legal grounds to prosecute Robert J. DeAngelis for first-degree murder." No one in the room objected. A moment of silence, then the commander nodded, ordering file completion for DA submission within 72 hours. The final 43-page forensic report was stamped "Confirmed Homicide." The case reclassification section stated, File 84-312, Lucia Halbrook, from missing person to homicide. Closed investigation pending prosecution. For the first time since 1984, Lucia Halbrook's case was officially categorized as a homicide with identified victim and perpetrator. Hale spent the afternoon reviewing the entire file, organizing each part into a legal evidence chain. He grouped 3 main document sets: 1 DNA evidence, 2 voluntary confession and DeAngelis's map, 3 forensic report, and identity verification. All signed per chain of custody. The nearly 600-page file, with color photo appendices, became the most complete ever submitted by the cold case unit to court. That evening, leaving the office, Hale paused in the hallway, looking at the solved cold cases board. Lucia Halbrook's name was just added to line 18, between 2 other 1980s cases. He lightly touched his pen to the letters, thinking of predecessor Harold Dempsey, who wrote retain sample E47B for DNA testing when possible. That prior generation's patience had led to this day. In the final internal report before DA transfer, Hale wrote, "Forensic report confirms death by head trauma. Traces and biological evidence reinforce victim-suspect link. Investigation file complete, sufficient for criminal prosecution. Below the signature, he added a personal note, non-administrative but weighty. Lucia Halbrook, no longer an unidentified missing person, she has returned to the truth. When he turned off the light, the room sank into the computer screen's faint glow, still displaying homicide, confirmed. Outside, Milwaukee settled into a quiet night, and in the cold case unit's data vault, file 84-312 was now sealed in red ink, ending a 34-year journey for justice for a young woman who vanished on a summer night in 1984. After the forensic report was finalized and the Lucia Halbrook case file officially shifted to prosecution, the Milwaukee Police Department decided to expand the investigation scope. Goal: determine if Robert J. DeAngelis was linked to other unsolved disappearances in the 1980s, especially those with similar context, timing, and location. The decision came in an internal meeting on May 20, 2018, led by Detective Paul Hale with Cold Case Unit, State Forensic Lab, and County DA representatives. The initial list included 12 disappearances or unidentified homicides from 1980 to 1986. 4 were prioritized for clear similarities: female victims aged 17-25, vanished at night, vehicles or personal items found near old industrial areas or Lake Michigan shore. Hale printed all files, ordered chronologically. He and the analysis team began cross-referencing details, routes, distances from disappearance to evidence discovery, and especially stored biological samples. The first reviewed was Karen Mullen, 22, missing in 1981. Last seen leaving a South Milwaukee bar, her car found in a lot near an abandoned metal factory. Old file noted male hair in the car, but 1980s technology was insufficient. Hale requested re-extraction and modern DNA testing. Results: hair DNA did not match DeAngelis, ruling out connection. Second was Diana Poole, Marquette University student, missing in 1983, walking from campus to dorm. Her bicycle was found in Washington Park, 2 miles away. File samples were degraded from improper temperature storage. Only a few fabric threads and faint fingerprints remained. Comparison reliability insufficient. Still, Hale noted, location similar, East residential area, less than a mile from DeAngelis's old residence. Third, Lynette Groves, 20. Missing September 1985, no vehicle, but witnesses reported her talking to an older man with gray hair, driving a small beige pickup. This caught Hale's attention, as a 1984 Lucia Halbrook witness also mentioned a beige pickup near the docks. However, after checking area vehicle registrations, no direct proof it was DeAngelis's, though he lived in Greenfield then and owned a matching truck. Other cases: Marjorie Rusk, 1982, Elaine Carter, 1980, were reviewed but lacked testable DNA evidence. Most stored samples were degraded or lost in facility changes. Still, comparing timelines, the team noted a striking pattern: most occurred in summer, within a 10-mile radius of central Milwaukee, overlapping DeAngelis's freelance security period after Schlitz. Hale wrote in the report, signs DeAngelis operated around East industrial areas in early to mid-1980s. However, no physical evidence confirms direct involvement. He and Dr. Jensen attempted matching DeAngelis's DNA to unidentified samples in the state database. Results: no matches. Still, Hale didn't dismiss the lead. He believed some old DNA might not be fully entered nationally or degraded in storage. In the late May summary to the county DA, Hale concluded, at least 4 disappearances in the same period share characteristics with Lucia Halbrook case. 2 overlap geographically with DeAngelis's former residence or workplace. No DNA or direct witness evidence for additional prosecution. Recommend retaining DeAngelis data in open comparison list for unidentified cases. The final evaluation meeting was May 28, 2018. Prosecutor Linda Carver said, "We can't expand charges on speculation. But clearly, the Lucia Halbrook case is pivotal. It shows DeAngelis had a clear behavioral pattern, distinct attack method, and deep knowledge of old industrial sites. Criminal psychologists were consulted for behavioral analysis. The psych report concluded, DeAngelis fits controlled opportunistic offender profile, selects isolated victims, strikes in familiar areas, uses professional skills to erase traces. These insights made the Lucia Halbrook case key, not just for resolution, but for illuminating an unrecognized crime pattern in 1980s Milwaukee history. The DA's office decided to archive it as a model file for future cold case training. In the expanded investigation report's conclusion, Hale wrote, "No direct evidence ties Robert J. DeAngelis to other disappearances, but timing, location, and behavior overlaps suggest a broader criminal pattern. Lucia Halbrook is the only case with sufficient evidence for forensic proof. This case thus becomes the key to an entire era." He paused, reread the last line, then added a short note. "Sometimes justice can't cover everything, but resolving one case narrows the shadows over many others." The 54-page report was stamped extended review, closed pending further evidence, closing the expanded review phase, while confirming Lucia Halbrook would be the central anchor for all future cold case efforts in Milwaukee. In June 2018, after the expanded investigation phase concluded, the Milwaukee County DA's office formally filed charges against Robert J. DeAngelis in court on 3 counts: second-degree murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The case file exceeded 800 pages, compiled from forensic examination results, suspect confession, physical evidence, and investigation reports spanning over 3 decades. This was the longest-running case in city history to reach trial with complete scientific evidence. Chief Prosecutor Linda Carver signed the indictment, representing the state of Wisconsin. Defense was handled by Public Defender Mark Feeney, assigned to DeAngelis after he claimed inability to hire private counsel. The trial opened at Milwaukee County Court on September 10, 2018, drawing heavy local media attention. Courtroom 4B was equipped with additional projection screens and audio systems to display crime scene photos, DNA evidence, and forensic reports. Over 100 citizens, reporters, and law students registered to attend. When DeAngelis was led into the courtroom, he wore a court-provided gray suit, his aged face framed by short silver hair. He avoided eye contact, staring coldly ahead. In the front row, Elena Halbrook, Lucia's mother, sat silently, clutching the old white handkerchief returned by police after testing. She had waited over 30 years for this day. The trial lasted 13 days. Prosecutor Carver opened with a firm statement, "We are here today to close a story this city has carried for 34 years. Every piece of evidence, from DNA, confession, to excavation site, points to one man, Robert J. DeAngelis, former police officer, who used his knowledge to conceal his crime." She projected the first evidence, handkerchief E47B, preserved since 1984, with a chart showing absolute DNA match to DeAngelis's 2016 trash sample. "No probability of random match," she said, calm but resolute. "This is the thread connecting a man who once swore to uphold justice to the crime he committed." Defense did not deny the DNA, but argued Lucia's death was a tragic accident. Feeney stated, "My client admitted wrongdoing in trying to stop Miss Halbrook from leaving, but there is no evidence of intent to kill. It was a panicked moment, not a plan." Carver countered by presenting the forensic report. Dr. Clara Jensen, Wisconsin State Crime Lab Director, testified as an expert. She affirmed in court the victim's cranial trauma could not result from a natural fall. The force was sufficient to fracture the skull base. Based on fracture angle and position, the perpetrator was behind the victim, striking hard with a blunt object. That is intentional conduct. Hale, as lead investigator, also testified. He detailed the 3-decade investigation, from discovering the handkerchief in 1984, preserving the sample per Harold Dempsey's note, to 2016 DNA retesting and 2018 remains excavation. On screen, a young Dempsey's photo and the note retained sample E47B for DNA testing, when possible, were enlarged. Hale spoke slowly. He believed science would speak for the missing. And now, science has. The trial's middle focused on evidence seized from DeAngelis's home. The wooden box with Polaroids, jewelry, and Lucia's student ID. Prosecution called it a trophy collection, typical of controlling sexual offenders. Defense objected, claiming no proof these items were taken from the victim. Carver immediately presented fingerprint results on the ID matching DeAngelis, collapsing the defense argument. On day 10, DeAngelis was allowed to testify. He stepped to the stand, scanned the room, and spoke in a weak, hoarse voice. "I was a cop. I know right from wrong, sin from crime. I made a mistake, but I didn't murder. I just lost control." Carver, cross-examined, lost control enough to carry a young woman's body to a factory basement, lock the door, and hide it for 30 years. DeAngelis fell silent. The question made him lower his head, saying no more. On day 12, closing arguments took place. Prosecutor Carver told the jury, a man who once wore a badge used that very knowledge to cover his crime. If we don't call that murder, what does justice mean? Defense sought sympathy, stressing the defendant's age and frail health. But public opinion leaned heavily toward prosecution. On the morning of September 23, 2018, the 12-person jury returned after 6 hours of deliberation. The courtroom was dead silent. When the judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" the 4-person stood, reading clearly. "We, the jury, find the defendant Robert Joseph DeAngelis guilty on all 3 counts, second-degree murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice." Murmurs erupted in the gallery, some sobbing. DeAngelis sat motionless, only closing his eyes briefly. The judge sentenced that afternoon, for intentionally taking Lucia Halbrook's life and concealing the crime for 34 years, the court sentences the defendant to life imprisonment without parole. Sentence effective immediately. Elena Halbrook shed no tears. She only gripped the white handkerchief tightly, nodding slightly, as if bidding farewell to her daughter. As the trial ended, Carver shook Hale's hand. "We finished what the previous generation left." Hale replied softly, "Not us, Dempsey, Lucia, and 30 years of patience." Media coverage was intense for days. Major Wisconsin papers ran the white handkerchief photo, the case's symbol, with headlines. "Justice after 34 years, Milwaukee's missing woman, finally named." In the summary report to the state DOJ, Hale wrote, "Verdict, guilty on all counts. Sentence, life without parole. Key evidence, DNA evidence, E47B, voluntary confession, excavation results, forensic verification." At the end, he added a small handwritten line, non-standard. "No one can restore 34 years, but at least the truth has been returned to those who deserve it." That evening, light rain fell in Milwaukee. Golden streetlights on Brady Street reflected on wet pavement, where Lucia Halbrook once left home in her red jacket. And now, in a changed city, the case bearing her name was officially closed, not in the police missing person files, but in the memory of a city that took too long to relearn the true meaning of justice. When the verdict was announced, and Robert J. DeAngelis was escorted from the courtroom, the Lucia Halbrook case officially closed after 34 years. The courthouse doors shut, but its impact rippled across Milwaukee, a city used to industrial crimes, rarely seeing a cold case of such duration fully resolved. Local press called it a miracle of justice and human memory. National networks like CBS and NBC reported a 1984 disappearance solved by a scrap of cloth and new generation DNA. In the first week post-trial, articles, documentaries, and specials on the Lucia case flooded media. Many reporters interviewed Detective Paul Hale, described as the one who completed the prior generation's dream. He always answered briefly, "Without DNA technology, without the patience of those who preserved files, we wouldn't be here." The quote was repeated often, becoming a symbol for the value of evidence retention in unsolved cases. Milwaukee's community, aged with time, recalled the summer of 1984 when Lucia Halbrook vanished on Brady Street. Former neighbors recounted seeing the young woman in a red jacket leave home, never to return. For them, the case was not just a crime, but a collective wound of a working-class city where secrets could be buried in brick and stone, but memories endured through the years. Local universities held criminology and forensic science panels, using Lucia's case as a prime example of the power of physical evidence across time. The Milwaukee PD's 2018 year-end report stated, "The Lucia Halbrook case marks a pivotal moment in Wisconsin investigation history. It is the longest cold case successfully resolved, with a 34-year gap between disappearance and conviction." In the appendix, investigator Harold Dempsey's name, who wrote retained sample E47B for DNA testing when possible, was honored as the foundation for the eventual breakthrough. By that winter, Milwaukee erected a small memorial on the Lake Michigan shore, where some of Lucia's ashes were placed. The inscription was simple: Lucia Halbrook, 1965-1984. Found, remembered, free. The memorial ceremony included veteran investigators, family, and neighborhood residents. As lake winds blew, the Wisconsin state flag fluttered, reflecting in the eyes of those who witnessed justice's long journey. For the investigative force, the case became a classic lesson in evidence preservation and genetic genealogy. Within months, Wisconsin issued expanded cold case program funding and mandated digitization of all pre-1990 files. An FBI specialist, asked about the Lucia case, said, "Without a DNA sample preserved intact for over 3 decades, we wouldn't have this outcome. Sometimes, justice just needs one person patient enough to wait." On the Milwaukee PD's official website, File 84-312, once titled "Missing Person, Suspected Foul Play," now displayed a new status: "Closed, Homicide Solved, 2018. Below, the system archived a final photo of the white E47B handkerchief taken before placement in the cold case unit's display storage. Beside the evidence was a small plaque, "Faith of One Generation, Proof of Truth." For Milwaukee residents, Lucia Halbrook's story was not just a case closure, but proof of human ability to overcome time in pursuit of justice. Editorials called it the case that taught a city to wait, while investigators saw it as a symbol of science and determination's power. By year-end 2018, the Lucia Halbrook file was moved to Wisconsin's permanent state archive. The thick, faded cover was stamped in red, "Closed, resolved after 34 years. In the final report, Paul Hale wrote a short, meaningful line: "File 84-312, complete. One person returned her name, and an entire city reclaimed its memory." As winter snow blanketed Milwaukee, the small lakeside memorial stood, a quiet period to a journey over 3 decades long. And on the 3rd floor of police headquarters, in a cold storage room, the white LH handkerchief rested in a glass case. The final evidence of a case that changed how people believe in justice's patience. The Lucia Halbrook case, though inspired by 1980s America, clearly reflects the values and challenges of modern U.S. society, where justice sometimes arrives late, but never vanishes. In a nation that prizes technology and faith in the legal system, this 34-year investigative journey reminds us that truth can be buried but not erased if people persistently pursue it. The detail of the white E47B handkerchief, seemingly meaningless evidence, preserved for 3 decades and later becoming the key to solving the case, symbolizes the spirit of "don't give up on the details," a lesson both investigators and ordinary citizens can carry into modern life. In today's American society, where information flows fast and public trust is sometimes shaken, the Lucia case underscores the importance of faith in the system and in people. Without investigator Dempsey preserving the sample on a hunch, or Paul Hale continuing what seemed a hopeless task, the case would remain a mystery. Similarly, in everyday life, from upholding social justice to facing personal injustice, patience and honesty remain the foundation that keeps society on track. The Lucia Halbrook case reminds us that technological progress, no matter how powerful, must be guided by ethical responsibility and human determination. In an ever-changing America, that lesson remains intact. Justice may be slow, but if we don't let go, it will always find its way back. Thank you for joining us in following the journey to restore justice for Lucia Halbrook. A story showing that truth can be buried, but never lost. Please subscribe to the channel to not miss other cold case stories, where the past speaks and justice is revived.